The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Leadership in Action Lunch and Learn webinar. I am Casey. Nice to see you all. We're going to be showing our panelists today, which is a little bit different, so I hope everyone likes getting to see our panelists' faces. So I'm going to start, and we're just going to give a couple more minutes to let everyone get into the webinar. We are at 12 o'clock, so I'll give another minute or two. And I just want to say that we've had a great turnout. We have had the most registrants register for this webinar, so I'm excited to get started. So I'll give everyone here about another minute, and then we will get started. Okay. Hello and welcome to today's Leadership in Action Lunch and Learn webinar, and happy Founders Day to all of our Phi Sigma Pi members. This is the first webinar in the Diversity and Inclusion mini-series. Today we will be discussing how to recruit diversity and reaching outside of our groups. I would like to welcome our collegiate and alumni members, and also I would like to welcome our alumni and volunteers from Hobie, our philanthropic partner. Well, thank you for joining in and supporting our webinar. We appreciate all of you attending this webinar today. If you have any questions or would like to answer any questions posed during this webinar, you can ask them or answer the questions in the GoToWebinar box on your screen. There will also be some polls during this webinar, and at that time you can pick one of the answers by clicking on your screen. We have two panelists joining us today. First is Gretchen Bellamy, alumna of the Alpha Eta chapter at the University of Delaware. Gretchen is currently the President and Consulting Director for Bellamy Management Consulting, LLC. Her business and legal training and expertise includes multiple roles as a global diversity and inclusion talent development strategist and senior attorney. She is now parlaying her world-class experiences into providing expert organizational evaluations and advisory services globally to transform diversity and inclusion strategies and programs, as well as foster talent development and positively drive profits. Gretchen previously worked for Walmart, analyzing human resource trends to devise leadership and inclusion programs for associates from store level to C-suite through innovative measurements and data collection methodologies. She developed and supported global culture, diversity and inclusion strategies, communications, external relations, programs, culture, and policy to transform and drive companies' cultures and embed diversity and inclusion as integral components for supporting the company's 2,200,000 employees and business operations. Thank you, Gretchen, for being here today. Next, we have James Crawford. James is currently serves the office of the Vice President at the University of Georgia as the Assistant Director of Staff Development and Student Affairs, Learning and Strategic Initiatives. Prior to his position at UGA, he worked in fraternity and sorority life as the IFC, NPHC, and Philharmonic advisor throughout his tenure as the Assistant Director of Greek Life at Vanderbilt University. During that time, he advised and empowered student groups to examine the diversity within their organizations and provide a space for them to create initiatives and action plans to promote diversity and inclusion in their community. James received his MED in Higher Education and Student Affairs from the University of South Carolina and his Bachelor's of Arts in Athletic Training from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And I want to thank James for being here with us today as well. Now, before I have them get started, I have a quick poll question for everybody. I want to know who's all here. So let me know who is here. Are you a PSP collegiate member? Are you a PSP alumni member, a Hobie alumni, a Hobie volunteer, or other? So if everyone wants to take a quick second to answer in that poll. Okay, looks like just about everyone has voted. So let's see these results. Okay, so we have about half of you are collegiate members for PSP, 12% are PSP alumni, 6% are Hobie alumni, 12% are Hobie volunteers, and we have 24% who are other, which is great. Thank you for being here today. Okay, so I am going to now turn this over to Gretchen and to James, so if they would like to join us. Hello, Gretchen.
Hey there.
And hi, James. Okay,
Hi.
I am going to bring up your PowerPoint and then I will let you guys get started.
Well, hi, everybody. So I'm Gretchen, as you can probably see on your screen. And I am very excited to be able to give back to Phi Sigma Pi because I received so much benefit from the Brotherhood when I was at the University of Delaware. And today, I think James and I have concocted a pretty substantial overview of how you can be more inclusive in the work that you're doing, as well as helping you to recruit more diverse members into your membership. So today you can see what the overview is, or the agenda. We're going to talk about what we want the outcomes to be, how diversity and inclusion impact your organization, and then talking about the journey. And it's not just the journey for the organization, but also the journey for each individual chapter. We're going to talk a little bit more about how that relates to Greek life and recruitment, where James is certainly an expert, having had an excellent conversation with him. And then talk about demographics and how those things can help you. And then finally, something that's probably the most challenging part of this, but how to start a dialogue when you feel uncomfortable. So the outcomes that I would hope that you'd get is a better understanding of diversity and inclusion and what they mean for your organization or chapter, better understanding of the importance of having a diverse chapter, a better understanding of your journey, better understanding of how the data can help your chapter, some practical tips for recruiting, and then some tips, as I mentioned earlier, on how to start a dialogue. I am a very open person, so if you have any questions, that are burning before we get to the end, and we'll definitely have time for you to ask questions, please feel free to send them on to Casey, and we can interrupt the conversation that we're having. But I want you to know that I'm pretty straightforward about this. We have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and recognize that without talking about these issues, they can never be instilled, the positive things can never be instilled into the organization at a national level or at the chapter level. Okay? So I'm going to get started with just kind of talking about my approach to diversity and inclusion. As Casey mentioned, I worked at Walmart, and I was working initially as an assistant general counsel in charge of global diversity and inclusion for the legal department, and global security, so about 4,500 people. And because of the work I did, then I was promoted to become a senior strategist working on diversity and inclusion for 2.2 million associates, which is kind of like the universe, if you can imagine. But really, now that I've gone out on my own, my approach is much different, and I think that it translates very well from a publicly traded company to a nonprofit organization, a member association, church, I mean, you name it, I can make the case for diversity and inclusion for you. Really, and as I explained to James, if you looked at a periodic filing for an organization like Walmart or Procter & Gamble, pick one, you would see most times in their annual report that there is a section called risk. And there is a risk to the business for the shareholders if there is a failure to attract and retain talent. That's typical language, you know, that might vary a little bit. So really, I think about that particular risk in terms of diversity and inclusion. What is the risk to the business, the organization, if you fail to attract and retain new members, for example, as specific to Phi Sigma Pi? And then also, so you have this broad kind of viewpoint of diversity and inclusion, and those things hit marketing, how you operate. The demographics of the U.S. are not going to change, right? Despite what is going on right now politically, short of a genocide, the demographics will continue to shift, and organizations, companies, et cetera, need to be resilient and agile and move along with the times, or they will find that they will fail. And I'm sure you have seen the examples. H&M was a really great example. The little boy with the monkey, the black child with the monkey on his shirt. That was a great example of being tone deaf and not moving along with the times, or of people not feeling comfortable enough to speak up when they know that it's something that's questionable. So when we're thinking about you personally, it comes down to brand, right? What is the brand of Phi Sigma Pi? What is the brand of your chapter? What is your personal brand? And I can assure you that the things that you're doing now in your life, and I'm speaking now more to the people who are now in college, but it's relevant, of course, to those of you who are in your careers. You really have to think about, when you go into the workplace, what is it going to look like? I just mentioned that the demographics are changing. And so if you're not ready to be agile and understand and recognize that having diverse teams, people from, and not just, you know, oh, we have, you know, our African American here and we have our token gay person here. No, like really recognizing that the backgrounds of people are extremely and extraordinarily important. Recognizing socioeconomic diversity is important, and learning those and instilling them in yourself now, because I mean, you can go on LinkedIn or any Indeed or something like that, and you can see there's a million jobs for people who do diversity and inclusion, but you want to be someone who does it well, and it's really part of who you are. And as you learn and grow and become a manager, if you choose that path of people, that you're not one that people don't want to work for. And so I'm going to share a quick story about how you can change the lives of people just by analyzing and recognizing that there are challenges. When I was at Walmart, I was asked to create a truly global legal department. We operated in 28 different countries, and with the headquarters here in Arkansas. I focused on Latin America, and I looked internally. So there was an internal component. How do we make that happen? But then also externally, when you're thinking about who are the people that are working for Walmart, who are the vendors that are providing legal services. Now, this can be any type of vendor, right? So you can think about, you know, who's supplying shoes to Walmart. But it's extremely important to that organization, as well as I would say Phi Sigma, any company or association, that the people who are working for you reflect the diversity of the people who are using your goods or services or becoming part of your membership. And so one of the things that we realized was that there were no minorities who were working excuse me, on Walmart Matters in any legal department or law firm. And the reason we were told is that they didn't speak English and that they didn't have table manners. And that really struck me because you're thinking about table manners. I mean, they didn't know how to act like lawyers. And I'll say, as a lawyer myself, like, I don't know if that's a compliment or not. But, you know, they didn't have that exposure was the point. And very simply, I said, okay, well, we'll partner with 2 different schools. And we looked at socioeconomic diversity. In Chile, there is the largest minority group are Mapuche, and most of them would just open up a law firm with a shingle and say, okay, I'm just going to be a solo practitioner, because they didn't have that opportunity, right? And so by doing that, we chose 12 students, 6 from each university, and provided them with English until fluency. So we got them in their 3rd year, and then they go for 7 years. So we got them in the end of their 3rd year. And then also provide them with an internship with a law firm or with Walmart Chile, if that's what they chose, and with a guaranteed job at the end. So they were getting paid, which was also amazing that they were getting paid for the last bit of their studies, but also that they'd have this job with the idea that ultimately they would immediately work on Walmart Matters, but then they would become the relationship partner. And that means a whole bunch of other things that I won't bore you with the details. But what that took to get to that point, and it's not expensive, it's easily replicable, it's sustainable. It took a lot of studying and understanding the culture. I went to 4 different countries doing the same study to see which would be ripe and ready. So I say that story because I want you to understand that it's not just about the US, but also there are creative ways that you can increase the diversity of your membership by thinking outside the box. And that's what it's going to take if you're going to be a leader in the new, the new age, I guess you could say. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so this should look really familiar to all of you. Scholarship, leadership, fellowship. And what I want you to think about is whether or not, if you're thinking through the lens of diversity and inclusion, whether or not you are living those 3 pillars of the brotherhood, and are your chapter brothers or your colleagues, for those of you who aren't participating right now actively in a chapter, are your colleagues really living those 3 pillars, where you're creating or learning enough and having the depth of knowledge about the issue? I would say the fact that you're on this call demonstrates that your willingness to learn and grow. And are you being inclusive of all people? Like, when I look at this and I think about my time as a brother, an active brother on campus, it was extremely diverse, and I didn't recognize that at the time, but it was something that made me feel really comfortable. And so one of the things that I want you to take away is, where does diversity and inclusion, and then we can add equity, which is a whole other thing, but where do diversity and inclusion fit into these pillars? And I can argue that they fit in every single one of them. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you're structuring your chapters, and if you're doing it so in a way that might be exclusive of people. Okay, all right, so I think there's a poll question coming up here. Casey.
Yes, okay, let me bring up the next poll question. Okay, our next poll question is, do you know the demographics of your university, workplace, or organization? So you can either say yes, no, or no, but you would like to, or you'd like more information on how you can find those demographics. And I'll give everyone a few moments here to answer this question.
I feel like these are the times when we need to have that background music, you know.
Yes.
The girl from Ipanema playing.
Okay, I'll give everyone a couple more seconds. Looks like almost everyone has voted. Okay. Let me share these answers. 70% said yes, which is amazing. Glad to see that. 3% said no, and 27% said no, but I would like to. So great.
I am super excited about that. So when you're thinking about it, do you mind going to the next slide then, Casey? So when you're thinking about diversity and inclusion, it's a journey. And I'll share with you, most organizations, companies, I guess I should say, they start on their journey because they've gotten sued, right? They discriminate against a pregnant woman and they lost. And so now all of a sudden they have to have this diversity and inclusion program. And not all programs are created the same, but I digress. But really what it comes down to is on that journey is that you're always improving. And after having some conversations with the leaders of PSP, I would say that the organization as a whole is kind of more at the foundation, getting started. It's really hard, especially having so many different chapters. But that doesn't mean that you can't evolve. And we've talked about some of the strategies to do that at the national level that can trickle down. But again, when you're thinking about the journey, think about this with the idea of brand. What is the brand of PSP? What's the brand of your chapter on campus? What's your personal brand, and how are people seeing you as a leader? Are they seeing you as one who wants everyone to be part, or is it just another club where I can't get in? Okay. So there's a few things, and I told James I really dislike PowerPoint a lot, but it does suit some things. But you can see when you're looking at the evolving to inclusion, of course, strong cultures, and I would argue that PSP has a very strong culture. It's very clear, the 3 pillars of the brotherhood, what they are, but knowing that will yield you strong return, but now you need to make sure that you're looking at it through that D&I lens. It will be, your chapter will be even stronger, the organization will be stronger. Are you seeing an uptick in the number of minorities, LGBT people, disabled people, veterans? And I use veterans because usually the way that you break down diversity, you do minority status, and then you'd say, okay, man or woman, or however someone might identify, and that's LGBT. It becomes a separate thing because you could be an African American woman who's gay, a veteran, as well as disabled, right? So you need to understand how those all work together. But then also thinking about what tools you can use, and that's the demographics part is extremely important when you're looking at, okay, we'll use the University of Delaware. If we know in the US it's 8% African American, and let's say on campus it's the campus is 10% African American, I would say that you should strive for the 10%. How do you get have your chapter membership be reflective of the demographics of your university, right? And sometimes, I mean, you might live in a place where it's not very diverse. That's okay, but can you match at least what the university has? Are you making sure that you are marketing to them in a way that makes them feel like they would enjoy being part of it, of the organization? Do you want to take it from here, James, and talk a little bit about the recruiting piece?
Just taking notes. My name is James Crawford, as they've said earlier, within this material, and I want to at least identify that I'm coming to you as a part of this as a non-member, so I don't know what it's like to be a brother of the organization, of the fraternity itself. I'm a man, I'm white, so there's a variety of other barriers to like what I could potentially be saying to you that might influence the way in which people respond. But I want to at least account for that because, like, from where I sit, the identities that I hold, visible and invisible, impact the ways in which people might respond to this material, but otherwise the ways in which they interact or engage with your organization. So I think that with the work that I saw the student leaders do at Vanderbilt was based off of kind of this dichotomy between, well, we recognize a very important and value need with increasing the diversity within our organization. And allow for me to kind of say, it depends on how you would like to define that, right? Initially, whenever people hear diversity and inclusion, generally speaking, your inclination is to kind of go to like something racially, like my racial identity or my ethnic identity, potentially a religious identity. But the men that we're working with in the IFC, the Interfraternity Council organizations at Vanderbilt, we're looking at, okay, well, what are some other ways that we need to incorporate diversity and inclusion within some of the messaging and some of the initiatives that we're rolling out. A lot of this was spearheaded by a handful, a small minority number of overall organizational leadership, but it was based off of one that I would argue that was not necessarily super popular. That's a thing, right? That influences impact of people's messaging, but he had allies within people that were in organizations that other chapters or other organizations were hoping to be like one day. So he utilized his network and his connection to create a case, a personal story that he shared as an openly gay male that is a leader of his organization, how potentially impacted he was when they had a social event, when he wanted to bring a date, he wanted to bring his boyfriend, but he didn't know if he felt like it was acceptable or welcoming, right? So in sharing that personal story and that dialogue, he created a deeper connection to his friends that they were able to kind of create this story and this question of, well, what do we not know about our leadership? What do we not know that's existing within our organization that we may potentially be missing just because of the lived experiences that we have? And so there was an interesting dialogue where they were kind of having this process of, okay, well, we have these social events, we have this formal, right, where everybody comes to it, and we've never really thought about what if we have someone who brings a guest that's wheelchair bound, or someone that is visually impaired or needs a walking stick. So we never really thought through the ways in which our actions were kind of showing some of our priorities, down to what happens. Are we prepared as a chapter internally to be prepared for if a brother brings a date of the same sex or same gender? And so in that dialogue, processing through that material, so at the point in time, it's very old data, but at like about 10 years-ish old data, but at that point in time, there was data indicating within fraternity and sorority, single sex, single gender organizations, this discussion of, well, within this discussion or dialogue, how many people might be LGBT in one of these organizations? And the data fluctuated between 10 to 15%, so like about 12%. So you have a historically Southern organization, very traditional in some ways, not really having any conversations about anything regarding gay or bisexual within his membership, and he's having to wrap his brain around the fact that if I have 83 members, 10 to 12%, you're talking about maybe 9 people or more, right? So there's 9 men in my chapter that as a leader, I'm not necessarily creating a space for them to feel welcome. Like, how does that, what could I be doing better as a president? So that fluctuated into a large conversation, or not fluctuated, but it came into like a big, large conversation of, well, do we work on internal? Because like, we don't want to bring people in that are different than us and them not be welcome. But do we work on external to draw them in? So navigating that as a chapter, as an organization, they kind of go, what internally do we feel is a need that we need to be working on so that we feel at least baseline comfortable with having a dialogue with someone that is different than myself? And the why behind that, the selling behind it is, as an organization that is preparing you to serve as a launch point for other experiences, like Gretchen mentioned, so if you choose to want to be a manager one day, depending on where you get hired, when you get hired, who you hire, you may not have any choice on who you manage. So to be the best manager that you can be, and or to be able to be the best manager, there's an opportunity of being able to have a dialogue of, well, I need to be prepared to be able to manage whoever I come across. So as people, as trends change, as things evolve, it's important to at least recognize, like, I may not completely understand things that exist within people's cultures or their worlds, but seeking to understand, to do your own research before asking them to be their educator for you, but being willing to have a private conversation to kind of say, what could I be doing better? So I think to take such a large topic for many to be able to grasp and handle and wrangle, to have a dialogue about within our chapter, what do we know, what do we not know? Do people feel safe in our chapter? Do people feel welcome in our chapter? Simon Sinek, popular author with Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last, he has a TED Talk that you could show your membership prior to a recruitment cycle or just in general, and it's based off of Leaders Eat Last. The TED Talk is called How Great Leaders Make People Feel Safe. And I think that's I think word choice is incredibly important there. How does my leadership make others feel safe? And if there is some sensation of safety, then I'm going to want to pay my dues, show up, become a member. If there's something that I'm getting here that I don't get elsewhere, so there's this perception that being an exclusive organization, you have to go through all these different barriers to actually become worthy to become a member, right? You need this X number, XYZ GPA, you need to be a part of this thing, you need to be a part of that thing. That makes sense, that's understandable. There's certain selection criteria to be made, but what are your metrics? I mean, my fraternity presidents that I advised at Vanderbilt, I would be like, do you have a strong brotherhood? Do you think that your brotherhood is strong? Yeah, absolutely. Well, how do you know? What data do you have to suggest that it's strong? What is your definition of strength? What metrics of success indicate strength? Is it because people show up on time? Is it because there's no issues with running for elections? So, they would always kind of say, we throw the best parties. Okay, fine. You throw the best parties. What's your measurement for best party? Attendance, overall attendance, repeat attendee, customer that attends and continues to purchase. So I think that being able to kind of develop these metrics where we kind of go, do our members feel like they're welcome here? Do they feel like their voice is heard? Do they feel like there's an impact here? And if you have that data speaks. In my mind, personally, we're in an age of data. So when you're doing a recruitment cycle, you kind of say, overall, here's the X number percentage of our members that feel like being a member contributes to their benefit and their success as a student here, XYZ ways. And here's with the membership that we have within the organization, ways in which they're impacted. So I think to take such a large dialogue and discussion and to kind of taper it down towards what metrics of the experience of members do you have? How can you prove that if I'm a person of color, if I'm a Black male and I'm joining your organization, do I feel like my identity is going to be respected, that it's going to be heard? Is there an external image to that brand, like what Gretchen mentioned, that's going to influence that? Or am I going to be one of few where no one really understands me or understands my experience? How do you understand that experience? I would connect with your campus resources. I would do some research in your own process. I mean, I feel like with the internet today, there's a million different kinds of articles that may or may not be real. And so being able to kind of discern and be a critical eye viewer of what material exists, what material doesn't exist. I think that the fact that, 58 of you are on this call and the max is 100, like that's a majority. And so being able to identify the fact that like people are taking the initiative and are researching and taking this back to their organizations. I am no expert in diversity and inclusion. I'm just very passionate about it because I saw how much, as a white man, my ability to create spaces and experiences for other people that don't hold my identities, that was empowering, to be able to provide an experience for them to be able to attain their leadership, to be able to attain their experiences on their own accord, and helping in some way. I mean, I view that as like the tantamount to leadership there. So with all that being said, I think that truly focusing on what do you have control over. You have control over the ways in which your members engage. They show each other respect. They make each other feel welcome and a part of it. They have some sort of familial component. You have a control over being able to help people identify variables and ways in which there's an impact in the membership and the experience. You don't have control over who's admitted into your institution. You don't have control over who's admitted into the organization in Oregon and you're in Florida or something. Like, you don't have control, but you do have control over the ways in which you recruit and things like that. So examining the ways in which the population of the institution is reflected within your organization so that people feel like there's others like them there. For some, visual representation is going to be important. If I'm a person of color, and I'm not trying to speak on behalf of all people of color, but if I see that there are people there that look like me or have similar experiences that I can assume like me, then I might be more willing to join. I might be more willing to relate to people. It's one of those things where it's kind of like the minute that you realize that somebody else sounds like you because they're from a particular region, or they use Coke versus Pepsi versus soda, or it's these relational components within your recruitment processes where you can show people that they're not alone. Because I think that that's the ultimate solution within some of these things. Is this I'm joining this organization to not just make it another thing of my resume, but to be able to have this connection with others to impact positively the community around me. And I think that this organization, looking at, as a non-member, doing as much research as I possibly could, it's one of those things where like having a session like this is incredible, because then it gives you a chance to learn and grow as an individual, which is happening a lot in college as it is, but it doesn't stop happening once you graduate. So I think that having the alumni that are on this call, being able to recognize what ways that they can connect with others is incredibly fascinating and wonderful. So I'm a rambler, so Gretchen, feel free to cut me off. But this stuff is very fascinating to me.
I got cut off there, so I missed the ramble, but I don't believe it was rambling. It sounded fantastic here at the end, and I hope that the people on the phone really got a lot from it. I got a lot from our conversation yesterday, so okay, so I'm going to ask you, you see at the bottom of the slide there, it says an inclusive environment is. Now, what I'd like for you to think about is, and this is a full question, what are the 3 words that you would use to indicate that your chapter or the organization that you're part of is inclusive? I already gave you Walmart's: welcome, comfortable, and safe. So how would you describe PSP or your organization?
And as you were doing answering these questions in your chat box, I will be reading some of them. So put your answers into the chat box so we can share some of them with the rest of our members here on the call and with Gretchen and James.
No pressure at all, right?
I want to be the first one, yeah.
And Gretchen and James, if while we're waiting for people to answer, if you guys wanted to continue on, and I can just kind of jump in with some answers.
Sure. So I'm sure that James, if I'm overstepping since I missed out a little bit on what you were saying, I'd like to talk about some practical ways to recruit. And really, my goal here is to we're just scratching the surface, but helping you know what you don't know, right? And have you think about or feel a little bit out of your comfort zone. And as I said at the outset, being uncomfortable or getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I can share with you, I had a boss who she could not say Black or Latino or any kind of identifier without putting her eyes up and looking like that. It made her extremely uncomfortable to say the word Black. You have to be able to do that. And that is a lot of self-reflection, and you can go, talk to others. I can't help you get there today in this short discussion. But I also want you to think about, how are you recruiting your members? What do your marketing materials look like? What language are you using? Where are you marketing? Those are really important. I'll give you an example. If you go and look at a job for Amazon, just pick any random job. You don't even have to, know anything about engineering, so to speak. If that's the one you look at. What you're going to find is that they have crafted their job descriptions in a way that starts with, here's what our organization is about, right? This is us. Then the next you'll see, this is the team that you'd be working with. And then finally you get a description of the role and how they envision that role fitting into the team. That's a very well written or style to write a job description. You know, in Walmart, I was working on those things, and really anybody could be, the way that they were written before was anybody could become CEO. There were no specificities, and that I would say was really overly broad, right? You need to get to the heart of it. And so when I asked you, you know, how are you recruiting, and thinking about your marketing materials and where you're putting them out, that will dictate who is showing up, right? Who is participating in when you're coupling that with your brand. You know, are you an organization that's known, or a chapter that's known for being open to having all types of members, or is it that you've, you know, gone above and beyond? You know, if you have to have a 3.2 GPA to become a brother, now are you setting it at a 3.7, right? Just to exclude people. And I don't know if James talked about, well, he did a little bit about the fraternity, like them going through that, the idea of, wow, can people who are in a wheelchair get into our fraternity house? That's a question that you need to think about. I can think about where we held most of our get-togethers and our parties, and I can tell you that it wasn't friendly for people who were in physical disability. There were a ton of steps going up and no other way to get into it. So think about like where you're holding these things, where you're holding your meetings, and I think that's something that's very important. And think about whether or not any changes you make to what the national guidelines are for membership. I mentioned having a really high GPA as a requirement. Ask yourself, are these becoming barriers? Are they too restrictive to allow for people who are not like those of us in the organization already to become members? So you could just literally be putting a boulder up. And then question why you have those restrictions. Is it because you want to prevent people from joining, and you want this to become an exclusive club? And you know, I'm probably too young to know members only jackets, but yeah, that's kind of what ends up happening when you do that. And think about what the intention is. Now, I go into pretty much everything in my life assuming that the intention of people is good, right? That they aren't intending to exclude me or others from a particular organization or group, whatever you might, what have you. But when you're thinking about what James said, actions show priorities, you may be walking the walk, but are you actually, or talking the talk, or are you walking the walk? Are you making sure that you are accessible to people? And then that's when you couple those questions, right? So what was my intent, or what was our intent in increasing the GPA? Was it necessary to do that? Or we having, you know, we're getting 1,000 people showing up to rush, and we can't handle that capacity, so we have to limit it in some way. So then when you look at the demographics and you start saying, okay, well, great, there are, you know, it's 10% African American, it's 5% Asian, and we have pretty much everybody is the same. It's the same, you know, we're all straight, white, grew up in Wisconsin. Do you feel that you can grow being surrounded by the same types of people? That's what I would ask myself, and I can tell you the answer is no. Like, it's a definitive no. Working in the largest company for the world, it wouldn't be where it is today if they weren't diverse. Of course, every organization has work to do. Every organization has skeletons in its closet. Every chapter will have skeletons, and but that doesn't mean that you can't change and improve upon your situation, your current situation. James, do you have anything to add to that?
I think it's important to consider So Simon Sinek he has the book Start With Why, and he has a TED Talk called How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And if I'm sure anyone on this webinar has done any kind of recruiting tabling for an organization or flyers or whatever it might be, you've always had someone kind of walk up and just be like, well, why should I join? And you have to have confidence in your brand and your product and knowing what you're going to be selling them. Because if you're not confident in it, why should they? And so I think in knowing that, it's kind of knowing what your organization provides. It doesn't have to be substantially different than what other groups do, but it's your spin, it's your passion, it's what it does for you, and that human anecdotal experience will enable people to kind of see some connection to it. In that TED Talk that Simon Sinek does, he compares TiVo and Apple, right? And he talks about how TiVo started some of the creation of the recording services that people use today. He says that, I TiVo my whatever on my Time Warner cable DVR, right? But he talks about how TiVo is a corporate failure because they started with what instead of starting with why with people, right? So they kind of was like, hey, would you like to record TV? Would you like to pause it? Would you like to rewind it? Would you like to do all these things with our product? You should buy a TiVo. And he was like, no one really understood that because it was new and innovative technology, so they were just confused, and they were like, why would I give you my money? But he talked about how if they would have flipped it and said, hey, are you a busy person? Do you study a lot? Do you wish that you could catch up on the Olympics whenever you could? Do you feel like you're going to miss out on This Is Us and you don't want to be the person the next day in the office that doesn't know about it? Boy, do I have the product for you. It's called a TiVo and you can record it. And so being able to connect with people's relational and message with it, right? So like Gretchen mentioned, there's that dialogue about, okay, well, we want to be competitive, so we want to up our GPA. Some of the best members probably aren't going to make your criteria then. So what are you doing for a recruitment mechanism to be able to recruit those people? Are you going to do something that's good for the community and kind of do like a tutoring session? Maybe some sort of mentorship component? What resources are you connecting them with or providing them so that you can make sure that the best candidates are eligible for that? Because not everybody has the time, the money, XYZ to be able to study all the time or to sign up for a tutor or whatever it might be. So some of those kind of connections and components will enable you to kind of recruit and show other people. Because if it's about education and scholarship and things like that, then how are you providing access to scholarship? Because like any organization, anybody will tell you, organizations take good grades, they don't make good grades. So how are you supporting people on the way in and then helping them maintain their grades? Because that's another factor. Is that social component and connection with other people. Is like, well, I'd rather play, PUBG or Overwatch or Destiny 2 video games over here instead of studying. So how is there that management of that? So, but ultimately getting to the place with that Simon Sinek conversation about what is our why as an organization, so that you have that confidence in your product to kind of go, this is why we exist, this is why we are here, this is why we do what we do, and we have proof, we have metrics, we have indications to say that, like, okay, well, how many of our people are graduating? How many people graduate within 4 years? How many people graduate with these honors? How many people are, from a career perspective and networking? Here's X number of people that have a position within 6 months of graduation. That kind of thing, to be able to kind of go, here's what we can do for you, here's what we need from you. And being an engaged member, being participatory, and that kind of stuff. So to kind of play off what Gretchen is saying about the GPA thing is that, like, what resources are you providing people? Because not everybody learns the same way. And so is there other ways and opportunities for that? So I think it's definitely one of many things, but if I'm someone that's trying to join an honors organization, how many of them are on your campus? How many, and what do you provide that's similar yet different? And how do you vocalize that to someone that doesn't know anything about it? Because I think sometimes, like, there's an assumption that anybody knows everything about our organizations, that they've done their research, that they've read every Wikipedia, every website, that they know what they're doing. Maybe they don't. Maybe their roommate told them to come to this involvement fair because being involved is going to make my resume look good. So I think at times, once we're in it, we kind of forget what brought us there. And sometimes it's not something substantially deep and complex. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm in college and I'm lonely and I want friends. And so you want that, but like, what else do you get out of the organization? Um, so when you tie all of that together, I think it's important is to kind of, what do we know? What do we know? What do we not know? What do I have control over as a leader? What allies do I have to push any kind of dialogues or whatever further? And maybe it's just something simple as an entry point for people, because some get comfortable with diversity inclusion conversations, some don't. Maybe it's, do we feel like we're creating a space where our members are growing as people? Do you say that to your executive board? And some of them might roll their eyes because they have another meeting to get to, and others might not. Others might just be like, "Oh, this is so interesting," but you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't ask, even down to, do you all enjoy being members of this organization? If there's anything that you could improve, what would you do? It's a good practice for you to do some sort of customer service satisfaction survey, because when you get into your professional career, being able to get a temperature check on those within your leadership is important. That's the pulse of your organization, because if you're not creating a space for those individuals to be there and thrive and be successful, they'll leave and go someplace else. And so there's that kind of dialogue of, well, if we're going to hire the best and we're going to recruit the best individuals, how do we retain the best? Is the space for them? Because if you don't, they'll go somewhere else. I mean, if you look at anything, people go where they feel valued, where they feel like they're mattered, right? Like, if you go into a different place, I mean, even like from a relationship standpoint, you know, it's Valentine's Day. If you're dating someone or you're with someone and they don't make you feel like they don't tell you that they love you, like there's no kind of impact of that you matter or you're valued with them, like eventually you're going to break up and you're going to date somebody that makes you feel like you matter. So it's some of that where it's within organizations. How do we show our members that they matter? How do we show them that their voice is heard, that the individual story is important? And how do we recruit that out of the other people to show that they do matter at an institution? I mean, you could be 5,000 or 65,000 students. You know, how do they feel like they're important? So a long ramble, I know, but within that dialogue and conversation, it's about the recruitment and management of talent, and how do you recruit these individuals to show them that they matter and that their experience is important. And the only way to really fully truly know that is to ask them. Like, do you feel like you matter here? Do you feel like your experience is important to us, the leadership of the organization? Do you feel like like you have a role and impact? If not, how would you like to get involved? What would that look like? That you not have the time because you have to work 2 jobs to go to school? Then like, okay, well, how can we work with you? So it's stuff like that. It's like, you don't know what you don't know, so until you ask.
James, I would say that part of that too is looking internally as well. To your point, you know, about if you have an organization that has 80 members and 10% or so would likely be LGBT, identify LGBT, you know, what are you doing to make those members feel comfortable enough to speak up, right? What kind of jokes are you making that may be alienating others? I'll give you an example. I know we're running out of time and there probably are questions, but my son is 12 and he has a friend who doesn't do very well in school. He doesn't show up to school a lot. And my son didn't want to be friends with him anymore. He felt that he was going to be a bad influence on him. And I had a choice to make. I could say, okay, well, Stefan, you know, it's fine. You don't have to be friends with him anymore. You know, you don't have to go to his house. Or I could say what I did say to him, which was, you know, sometimes you are meant to be the good influence on people, right? You're the one that is meant to help them where they may be deficient. And to James's point, which is just like, he just hit a home run with what he said. You don't know the circumstances. If someone's working 2 jobs, etc. When I was at Walmart, I was in charge of the internship program for the legal department. And the recruiters told me that I had to choose, because we were hiring 6 interns, I had to choose 6 schools. My question to them was, well, how do I know which school to choose? Do I choose my alma mater and say, okay, everybody who goes to Duke, they all get an opportunity? No, I decided that I would go on my own, and this is when ways, right, to find members. Oh my gosh, you probably can't hear me again. Can you hear me, James?
Yeah, I can hear
There
you.
you are. Okay. Okay. So the internship, I decided there were 183 ABA accredited law schools, and I found the email addresses for every single career services office for those 183 schools, and I sent out the flyer and information. And we got probably the first year, I think it was like 150 applicants, and then the second year was like 400. But what was amazing about that was we then had this very rich pool. I created kind of a spreadsheet so we could evaluate people without, there were 7 of us reading all of the applications. But what was amazing is that we all came pretty close to the same groups of people that we wanted. And the group that I had that was evaluating the internship applications was very diverse, and the people that we got were diverse. And you know, a lot of times, you know, like everyone wants the people that go to Yale and Harvard, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I know that, for example, there could be a woman who got into Harvard, but her mother is really ill and she's in Florida, and this woman decides to stay in Florida and go to FIU, which is, I think, a tier 2 law school. That doesn't mean that she's not worthy of working in the Walmart legal department. She made a life choice, a very admirable one. And so I think you have to really think about what are the motivations of people, and why are they in their life circumstance, and get to know them very well. So Casey, do you have some of the words that people came up with?
Yes. I didn't want to interrupt you guys. It was such a great conversation you were having, so I didn't want to interrupt you. But yes, we got some really great words. It seems like our top one is open. We have open, honest, safe, accepting, empowering, which I loved, welcoming, forthright, open-minded, they educate, unbiased, comforting, understanding of backgrounds. And then we have gender inclusive, which we love to hear. We have someone say here, which is perfect, it's gender inclusive, not co-ed, because that's what we like to tell all of our new members that are coming in. We're gender inclusive. We are not just co-ed. We include everyone. And flexible, accessible. We got some really great words and some really great things from what you guys were saying. So I'll let you guys take it back over.
I would say, so thinking about those words, and Casey, we're going to share this, I would assume, these words and
Yes.
things, but thinking about that and taking it back to your organization or your chapter and saying, okay, let's really think about what does it mean to have an open, honest, safe environment, right? I'm a big fan, like I lead organizations through defining diversity for them, defining inclusion, and then looking at what the mission and vision are. And those 3 words would fall under the vision. So what's the vision of your organization? Think about what James said to you about being open, you know, and thinking about what the circumstances are of others. I think that you will, if you go through those exercises, and this is not a document that just sits, it's something that's living, right? It's how you, I mean, now this is when I say brand, I mean, like you literally put these 3 words on everything that you publish. And everyone who is a brother or a member, they are able to say what openness means. What does it mean to feel safe, right? I'm able to speak up. I feel that, you know, I am accepted the way that I am, and, you know, there aren't hurtful jokes that are being made, or if there are, I'm able to feel safe speaking up when that does make me feel uncomfortable. I know we're like 2 minutes. We're kind of coming at time, and I know I don't want to keep people over. James, did you have anything else to add before we go into like tips on how to start the dialogue?
The only final thing I would add, because of time, is one of my mentors, or my previous supervisor, she gave me a bit of advice that people have an alphabet of needs, A through Z. and being understanding that your organization may fulfill all A through Z for them, then the needs that they have as a member, it could be A through C, and then D through Z is going to be, they're going to receive that elsewhere. And so being understanding that you have no control over what people get out of their organization. You can provide as many experiences and opportunities as you can, but they may get things elsewhere because of their alphabet of needs is going to be different than everybody else's. So all the various things that we're throwing at you isn't to say, hey, you should be perfect as a leader of your organization and you should meet all expectations and all things. It's not to say that to, you know, kind of make you kind of go, oh, well, I guess I don't need to try anymore. No, that's definitely it. You should continue. But it's going to this dialogue of how do I meet people where they're at and be able to address things that they need within the organization, as well as understand as myself that I'm only one person or we're only a handful of people. So how do we collect and get allies elsewhere, right? So how do we connect with campus resources with the University Advising Office to get data on ways in which the students are learning nowadays? Like my peers are learning, how are they learning? How can I help them within our organization? How do I reach out to other student organizations office on campus to be able to help manage these groups appropriately? So being able to like have an approach that's kind of like, what do people need out of an organization? And that's okay that it's different for each person because it's going to be.
And each person will bring something different that you probably are lacking, right? And that just takes you getting to know them. So Casey, you create a quick slide about conversations, or we should save that for another time.
I think I will just pose that question out. I think if you guys want to wrap up with some of these conversation tips and that last question we had, I think I'm just going to share that with our members here to answer back to us, and we can kind of compile a database and they can share that question also with their chapters, because I think that'll be a good conversation for them to have with their chapter. So we'll save that one for the follow-up.
Okay. So very quickly, when you're thinking about how you are going to initiate conversations amongst your members or your team, think about the setting in which you're going to be. It should be open, round, and I know these are like super practical tips, but a round table or a round space where everyone can see each other. There should be a facilitator who kind of gives you know, the opening message that is not read but heartfelt. You know, you don't want to make it very corporatized. Think about the questions that you want to ask. And one of the most successful conversations that I had with this came, gosh, a year and a half ago when you had the Orlando Pulse shooting, club shooting, and the Philando Castro murder or death, however you want to look at it. It caused a lot of upset feelings. So if you have questions that kind of spark those conversations, you'll be able to begin to understand when people start sharing their stories, and people really do want to share if it's a safe space. You know, share what their experience was like getting into college, or the fact that, you know, when they're walking across campus, XYZ happened to them. And you may find that you have a lot more in common. There are other activities that you can do where you can say, okay, you know, everybody who has one or more siblings stands up. Everybody with 5 or more siblings. Everybody who has, you know, 10 or more, which is a category I fall into. But you know, you get to start to see, well, wow, this person rides a motorcycle like I do, and so you start to see those similarities. So you have that an opening question, kind of like icebreaker. Then you have your topics, and they're topics that everyone had agreed on beforehand and knew about. And then just don't interrupt or interrupt as appropriate, right? If you need to move the discussion along, be neutral in the conversation. Again, knowing that the intention is good. People just come from different perspectives. Eye contact, body language, we know about. And then also there are, you know, confidentiality. If you do have a note taker, which you probably should, those notes, no one's name should ever be written down, just kind of the ideas or the outputs that you have. And then share them, and then see if you need to go deeper or have more conversations. But that's, I mean, in 3 minutes, as quick as I could, give you some tips on how to start a dialogue. You have James that you want to add?
I would say with any of these, being able to pay attention now, right? So identifying body language, how engaged are people, what is their tone of voice, who's speaking, who's not speaking, who's paying attention, who's looking away. Is there anything else to that? Where a sign or something else? It could be that they're bored and they're just on the phone. It could be that they're taking notes. It could be that they engage differently in auditory learner or visual learner or whatever it might be. But it could be else. So being able to pay attention to not just who is speaking, but who is not speaking, and especially if you've had other individual dialogues with that person and you know this is an issue that they're passionate about and they don't speak up. So that's something I would add to any of these discussions, is kind of being able to kind of get a pulse of the overall room, kind of identify where are people engaging and not engaging, and is this because it's in the material, or is there something else? It could just be something as simple as if they have another meeting to get to, or anything like that. Or it could be so many other things, but it takes you leading that initiative to kind of ask and be like, hey, I saw that you're really engaging. Is everything all right? Are you doing all right? Is work going okay? Whatever it could be. And it could be just as simple as them going, oh, yeah, I'm fine. Everything's great. But at least you asked. So I think examining those, there's with setting and discussion and things like that, who's in the room, who's not in the room, that can impact the way in which people just engage in dialogue. If there's someone in the room that everybody typically disagrees with or is very combative, then people may not want to discuss with that individual present or not feel comfortable. Setting is the kind of the dialogue of like, if we need to have an accountability meeting with someone that I manage, am I in their space? Are they in my space? Is it a room that is a neutral space? What does that space feel like? Is there some sort of power dynamics that exist that we're not necessarily paying attention to? Is it in public? Is it private? Is it my identity is influencing that, right? If I'm a male and I'm having a conversation with a female that I don't understand her lived experiences, how could that be influenced to where she doesn't feel comfortable talking to me? So those kind of things of being able to be cognizant of your identities and the space that you're creating and paying attention to that within these 3 different conversation tips.
And with that, I'm just going to wrap everything up because I think that's ending on a great note. And I want to just thank you guys so much, Gretchen and James, for this amazing discussion with how teaching us how to recruit diversity. And I want to tell any of our members that if you have any questions that you would like answered, please feel free to send them to lia@phisigmapi.org, and we will make sure I can always ask Gretchen and James that question, and they can help me with some answers for you guys so you can get those questions answered. So I just want to thank them and tell them thank you so much for all of their hard work and putting this webinar together for us. So thank you, Gretchen and James.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Take care, everyone. Reach out if you need to.
Yes.
Bye.
So I want to let everyone know you'll be able to watch and share this webinar. It has been recorded and it will be on our YouTube page at youtube.com/PhiSigmaPi. And it will also be on the Phi Sigma Pi Facebook page. So make sure that you share this with your members or coworkers who are not able to join us this afternoon and would be interested in this webinar. And I want to thank you for participating again today. And for our PSP members, you have earned 8 leadership and action points. So congratulations. The next Lunch and Learn webinar, as you can see, will be on Wednesday, March 14th. It will be at 12 p.m. Eastern. And the topic we will be talking about, continuing our diversity and inclusion mini-series, is how to have tough conversations about diversity and race, about opening up those conversations. And our next Feet Meet will be taking place on Thursday, March 1st at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And our topic will be becoming an officer. So you can register for that. Registration is open at phisigmapi.org/tweetmeet. And in your follow-up email today, you will be receiving a survey link. If you could please take that survey, tell us how we did and what we can do to improve so we can make these Lunch and Learn webinars the best as possible. So that does it for today. Thank you all for hanging in there. I know we went a little over, but the conversation was so great, I didn't want to cut anyone too short. So thank you again for joining in today's Leadership in Action Lunch and Learn webinar. I hope to see you next time. Lead on.